Good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome to you all. My name is Deborah Patta. I am a foreign correspondent. I work for CBS, but today I am your moderator and I will be moderating the session. Before I worked for CBS, I worked in South African media, and I have a reputation in this country. Ask anyone who knows me for not being a very nice person on television. When I ask questions, there's a word that they use. If I was a man, I'd be tough and assertive. I'm a woman, so I'm aggressive and something else. And I fully intend to trade on that reputation today, because our panelists have been advised that we have a very short amount of time, which means they have 3 minutes each. And should you go over, well, it will be like the Oscars, and you don't want me to sing, so we don't have any music to play. So do try and stick to time, because we want to hear from everybody. I think this is a very exciting meeting, because what you have here are all the heads of the CPF who are going to share their vision with you here today. And this was envisaged as an intimate gathering, a small gathering of people, select people. Initially, even this was going to be a private behind closed doors meeting, but the idea was to throw it open so that you can get some kind of insight into what the leaders from around the globe on these very important issues are thinking and what the vision is. So without further ado, let's get straight into the discussion. So to begin with, a very warm welcome to the director of the FAO, Mr. Graziano da Silva, who will kick off the session with some opening remarks and the vision of the FAO on forests in the post-2015 era. Thank you. So, in a sense, the first question was answered with the sharing of the FAO's vision. Our next question goes to Manuel Sobral of the UNF. The United Nations Forum on Forests recently took very important decisions on the future work on global forest policy. Where should the forestry world be heading, and what do you think is the single most important action countries have to take to achieve this? Thank you very much, Manuel. For all ideas of CBD, biodiversity sustains life on Earth, and much of this biodiversity can be found in forests. In the future, how much biodiversity do you think we'll need, and how can it actually be conserved?
Well, forests are...
Thank you very much. Peter Holmgren of C4. Increasingly, there are calls for a more integrated landscape management. In view of this, do you think that there'll actually still be forestry research in 20 years' time, and what exactly would the focus be? Mr. Emmanuel Zemeka of ITTO, deforestation and forest degradation continue to threaten the world's tropical forests, as you only too well know, and of course the livelihoods of the people depending on them. Will tropical forests disappear in the next 20 years? And what do you think the 3 key changes are that will become necessary to prevent this from happening? Sliver of hope.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zemeka. Tony Simons of ICRAF. Agroforestry is often hailed as a perfect marriage of agriculture and forestry. How do you see future rural landscapes developing? Thanks very much. Magdi Martinez-Solomon, thanks for joining, from the UNDP. In a few weeks, the Sustainable Development Goals will be adopted at the UN Summit. How do you see the role of forests and forestry in their implementation?
Well, thank you very much. Perhaps the difficulty of the Sustainable Development Goals framework of the agenda.
Thank you. Mike Wingfield of UFRO. We heard from Peter about the fact that there will be research in 20 years' time. You're representing the world's forest research organizations. How do you envisage the science policy link in the future?
Deborah, thank you.
Much, and thanks to everybody for their comments. I mean, just to draw out some common themes before we move to the next round of questions. I think one of the things that's coming through very clearly is that none of us can achieve this alone. That I think everybody said in various ways, that this is something that needs a united effort. And in particular, we heard about the importance of involving communities to ensure that they are part of any projects, development work that is done. We also spoke about biodiversity. We heard that this needs to happen on all levels. It's not just one little isolated area. And again, this was a common theme, is that forestry needs to be integrated in so many aspects of sustainable development, of climate change, you name it. Forestry is there, needs to be an integrated part of it. We heard from Peter about research still being very, very crucial, still going to be around in 20 years from now, but that perhaps the definitions of forestry need to change in some kind of way. And then we heard about the future, what's going to happen, not just in terms of research, but tropical forests. Emeka gave us a sliver of hope there. He wasn't 100% optimistic, but that there was still some hope, but it requires a lot of work, a lot of effort. And again, that came through as a common theme, that this is not something that can be done without massive amounts of effort and work. Tony spoke about, again, also definitions, that moving away from institutional definitions of agroforestry, of forestry, a tree in a rubber plant is one thing, a tree outside is something else. How do we define forestry? Those kinds of things will fall away as we look towards a new vision. And that science and policy, again, need to work together. So here, again, we have another example of that integrated approach. And we heard about the number of mechanisms that are being developed to support policy makers. In the words of Paolo Caballero, a great quote there, this is, it requires action on the ground, that it can't just be all talk, that we need to get a commitment, it needs delivery on the ground, that we have a unique window, we have a unique responsibility, but we also have a unique opportunity right now. And then in terms of the future of economic development and forestry, again, that idea of a coherent fiscal policy. Meta spoke about the importance, in fact said that she couldn't emphasize this enough, how important it was, gave us that interesting example of the figures. It needs $30 billion a year, whereas fuel's $480 billion, I think was the figure you quoted. I mean, it seems such a lot of money, but when you compare it. And Luther, summing it all up again, in fact, bringing it right back to that very point, that everybody needs to work together, that including and having an inclusive governance model, which involves all aspects, including the communities that have been managing forests and been their protectors, need to be included there. So thanks everybody for your comments. We're going to move to the next round of questions. It's actually one question to everybody. And again, need to stick to the time, but you did very well. I was very impressed. Thank you everybody for sticking to the brief. We really appreciate that. That's rare in a panel discussion. So clearly forestry people are very good and very disciplined when it comes to sticking to time. If you feel that your question has been answered, don't feel the need to come back to it, just add one or two more points. But the question that we would like you to answer now, and each person, I know you have prepared statements, is what can the CPF collectively and your own organizations individually contribute to make the vision a reality? Just give us one key contributing factor, one key contribution that the CPF can make, and perhaps one that your organization can make. And I'm just going to go down the line, no particular order. We'll start with you, Magdi, at the end.
Let me
Thanks very much. Well, before I hand over to the Director General to conclude the session, maybe just to summarize some of the points. Again, very similar themes. I mean, obviously you spend a lot of time together. It's great for us to have an insight. This is what they do, sit around and talk about these kinds of things in a less formal way, probably. We heard from Magdi that good, sustainable development management makes good economic sense, and that perhaps the CPF has lost its impetus of why they were started, that the need to advocate, to work together a little bit more, maybe improving that. From Paolo, we heard about the importance of identifying key interventions, and again, the focus on working together, that you have to work as a collaborative effort. This is crucial. We heard from Emmanuel, again, strengthen coordination, a huge emphasis on this. I mean, that seems to be something that's coming out quite a lot. Mike spoke about how the CPF connects so many disciplines, but perhaps communication is not always what it should be. And that better communication would go a long way towards improving the work of the CPF and obviously of the sector generally. And we'll emphasize this point too, that the CPF is useful for coordination and for international action. Perhaps one of the shortcomings is not every single member is as active as they should be, that several recommendations have been made and that now the CPF needs to actually move on these, but that everything is interrelated, that forestry cannot be seen in isolation. This is something that I think is a theme for the whole afternoon, that forestry is not something that's sort of out there, but that it has to be incorporated and can't be treated separately. Luther spoke about the support for ongoing initiatives, and that in particular what they will be doing is generating political support, which I don't think any of us can say should be underemphasized. That's obviously a key and crucial component. Tony spoke about the points that he'd made earlier and the actions that need to happen around this, from the concept of a single tree can make a difference, and the other points that he made in his opening comments, that the CPF can provide better guidance for governance, for countries, that the key thing though is that we need to look at these issues together. There need to be public and private partnerships, they need to be smarter, and they need to be mutually beneficial for all, so that there's buy-in, so that everybody continues to buy in. Meta raised a very important point, and I think it came at a good point in the discussion, is that you all have the same message, and yet you still haven't found this magic bullet. That in some ways you're still on the outside, that the forestry sector is not integrated, that we talk about this all the time, but it's just not happening. That you need to encourage all the members of the CPF to bring in their networks, that this is something that needs to happen in a hugely collaborative way. We also heard from Braulio about the need for common understanding, that there's a good mixture. I mean, you had some very positive points to make, to enhance collaboration. That is essentially what the CPF is for. But the important challenge is that you liaise, and again this repeats the theme that forestry can't be seen in isolation, that you have to liaise with the outsiders of this sector. For those that are not in the forestry sector, it's important to be constantly talking to them. So clearly we can see this is something that's going to guide the discussions over the next few days. And Peter very articulately summed up some of the risks, that CPF is a good platform for communication, but that it doesn't take formal action. You can come up with joint actions, you can come up with ideas, but it's not supposed to be a formal action, that one has to be aware of this. Otherwise you try and make CPF into something that it isn't. But that what needs to happen is that you need to strengthen that joint platform, the communications, and make sure that forestry is not kept in isolation. So thanks very much to all our speakers and for their input. You're going to be interacting with them over the next few days, so you'll get another chance to talk to them, to hear their ideas. I'm sure you all have ideas of your own. You're all, in your own ways, certainly very high profile. But this was a unique insight into the CPF and this unique body that is made up of heads of global organizations tackling this particular sector. And so to conclude, I'd like to now once again ask the Director General of the FAO, Mr. Graziano da Silva, to conclude this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all,